Every day we walk past them, those old buildings with windows and doors buried halfway underground. We're told this is the cultural layer, the dust of ages that has slowly and steadily accumulated over centuries. The official version sounds simple and logical, but what if it isn't the harmless dust of time? What if it's the silent evidence of a global event that literally buried an entire world, erasing it from our collective memory? This question is the starting point of our investigation. And it's not just about the giants of ancient myths. It's an attempt to understand why our cities look the way they do, and what secret their buried floors truly hold. Let's leave the buried floors behind for a moment and look inside our museums. There, behind glass displays, lie other anomalies. Silent objects from that same world buried beneath our feet. These are artifacts that were clearly not made for us. In the armories, you can see enormous firearms that are simply baffling. Scholars suggest they were specialized tools, perhaps for duck hunting. But a closer look at the details causes this explanation to fall apart. Consider the immense trigger and firing mechanism. A person of our size would have to pull it with their entire hand, making any kind of accurate aim impossible. The stock of such a weapon is so large that bracing it against one's shoulder is out of the question. This isn't a hunting tool, it's a personal weapon, perfectly fitted to the anatomy of someone many times larger than an average human. Next to the firearms, one often finds giant swords. Historians label them as two-handed or ceremonial. But what warrior would realistically enter a battlefield with such a cumbersome machine? While he struggled to lift the massive blade, an opponent with a standard sword could land several precise strikes. Such a weapon is ineffective, even dangerous for a warrior of our stature. It only becomes deadly and practical under one condition: if its wielder was around 4 meters or 13 feet tall. Only then does this blade transform from an impossible weight into a balanced and fearsome weapon, proportional to its owner. But the world of the past was not only for warriors. Let's move from the armories to the libraries and archives. There we find books of such immense size that they're hard to even imagine on a modern bookshelf. Lifting one of these volumes is a serious physical effort. Reading it while holding it is uncomfortable. Storing it is impractical, as a single tome takes up the space of a dozen regular books. Perhaps they contain a vast amount of information that justifies their size? But open them, and you see large, widely spaced text. The very process of making such editions required a colossal amount of material and labor, far more than for standard format books. All these objects, the guns, the swords, the books, have one thing in common. They are completely illogical and non-functional for people of our size. Their existence has only one rational explanation. They were everyday utilitarian items for their true owners. These objects are real. Therefore, their owners must have been real too. But who were they? Just a few unusually tall individuals? Natural anomalies? Photographs taken only a century and a half ago reveal a far more profound reality. Modern science offers us a convenient explanation. Gigantism. It's a medical condition, a malfunction of the pituitary gland that leads not only to abnormal growth, but also to numerous health problems and a shorter lifespan. Today, people of extraordinary height are often seen as individuals with a disability, rather than as possessors of unique physical gifts. However, old photographs and chronicles from the late 19th and early 20th centuries tell a completely different story. They show us the faces of the last generation of those we would call giants. Looking at these images, we see something astonishing. Anna Swan and her husband Martin Bates, both of whom were nearly 2.5 meters or 8 feet tall, had normal, harmonious body proportions. They didn't look like people suffering from a disease. They looked like representatives of the human species, simply scaled up. They lived full lives, fell in love, and even tried to have children. Their story is filled with drama. Their newborns were incredibly large. One weighed around 10 kilograms or 22 pounds, and was 76 centimeters or 30 inches long, 4 times the normal size. But their time in this world was tragically short. They passed away just a few hours after birth. And they were not unique cases. Fyodor Makhnov from the Russian Empire stood at 2 meters and 39 centimeters, or 7 feet 10 inches, and also had a proportional build. Amalia Gilly, at 2 meters and 19 centimeters, or 7 feet 2 inches, was admired by her contemporaries not just for her size, but for her beauty and perfect proportions. These people did not suffer from the skeletal distortions that often accompany modern gigantism. Science needed a way to explain them, and the easiest way was to reclassify them from descendants of an ancient race into medical curiosities. The phrases, "Your Highness," or "Your Majesty," which today seem like mere formalities, may have once been literal descriptions. People like them are still born today because traces of their genes remain in our DNA. And sometimes, this ancient memory makes itself known. Yes, they now live shorter lives than average, and are often ill. But this isn't due to a specific disease. It's because something on our planet changed irreversibly over the last few hundred years. The environment in which they could thrive has vanished. Moreover, just 200 years ago, people of great height were not only common, but were valued for their strength. The Prussian king Frederick William I assembled an entire army of giants, the so-called Potsdam giants. Old engravings show that their height ranged from 2.5 to 3 meters, making them a formidable force on the battlefield. They were perfectly healthy and capable of fighting, something that cannot be said for most modern giants. This proves that their physical condition was fundamentally different. We can see that as recently as 200 years ago, giants were a normal part of our world. Yet today they cannot live full lives within it. Something changed in the very air, in the physics of the planet itself, right before the eyes of the last generation of giants. What was it? The answer may seem fantastic, but it explains not only the fate of these people, but also the existence of those who were even larger. To understand how giants could not just exist, but thrive, we need to look beyond biology and at the very physics of our planet. Skeptics rightly point out that under today's conditions, a giant skeleton could not support its own weight, and they are absolutely right. The key phrase here is under today's conditions. But what if, just a few centuries ago, those conditions were completely different? What if the most fundamental parameter of our environment, atmospheric pressure, changed? To see how this works, consider the elegant Japanese art of bonsai. To grow a miniature tree, it's often covered with a glass dome, creating a low-pressure environment inside. The internal pressure within the plant's cells is balanced by the lower external pressure, and the tree remains small while retaining the proportions of a full-grown plant. Now, imagine the opposite process. What if we placed a living organism in an environment with a pressure several times higher than today's? To prevent its internal systems from being crushed, it would have to evolve, growing larger and stronger to counterbalance the external environment. In such a world, enormous size is not an anomaly. It's a necessity, a logical consequence of the laws of physics. Therefore, it's possible that just a few centuries ago, the atmospheric pressure on Earth was significantly higher. This would have created ideal conditions not only for giant humans, but for all flora and fauna. Trees were taller, animals were larger, And this fantastic idea is supported by even more shocking evidence that official science prefers to ignore or declare as forgeries. This evidence points to the coexistence of humans and the creatures we call dinosaurs. We're taught that the dinosaurs died out 65 million years ago, but artifacts scattered across the globe tell a different story. In the jungles of Cambodia stands the ancient temple of Ta Prohm. Its walls are decorated with bas-reliefs of local animals: monkeys, deer, parrots. And among them is one creature that doesn't fit into the modern fauna. It is an animal with a distinctive row of bony plates on its back and a spiked tail. The image is a 100% match for a scientific reconstruction of a Stegosaurus. How could the ancient Khmer have depicted with such accuracy an animal whose bones paleontologists would only unearth centuries later? The answer is simple. They carved what they saw with their own eyes. In South America, thousands of so-called Ica stones were found in Peru. These are river stones covered in complex engravings. They depict scenes from the life of an ancient civilization. People performing complex medical surgeries, studying the stars with telescope-like instruments. But the most astonishing images are of humans interacting with dinosaurs. They are riding them like horses, hunting them and studying them. For the people who created these stones, dinosaurs were not prehistoric monsters, but a part of their daily lives, much like livestock or wild game. But the most compelling physical evidence is in North America, in the state of Texas. In the bed of the Paluxy River, there are fossilized dinosaur tracks. And right alongside them, sometimes even inside them, in the exact same geological layer, are clear human footprints. This is direct physical proof that humans and dinosaurs walked the Earth at the same time. The picture of our world changes completely. A planet with a denser atmosphere and higher pressure, inhabited by giant humans and prehistoric beasts that were a common sight. And this world existed very recently. Where did it go? And why did it disappear so suddenly? The answer lies right beneath our feet and is visible from space. Now, with this new understanding of the old world, let's return to where we began, the buried lower floors of old buildings. The theory of a slowly accumulating cultural layer no longer seems convincing. The material that hides foundations and entire floors all over the world is not the dust of ages. Its composition is silt and clay mixed together. Such deposits are formed in only one way. They are carried by a massive amount of water. This is nothing less than the evidence of a global flood that covered cities and continents all at once. This was not a gradual process, but the consequence of a sudden and devastating catastrophe. But the flood is just one of the scars left on the body of our planet. If you look at the Earth from space, you can find other, equally mysterious anomalies. Across the entire planet, from arid deserts to the Siberian taiga, are scattered thousands of perfectly round lakes and craters. Official science explains them as the result of meteorite impacts. But this explanation contradicts the basic laws of physics taught in schools. Meteorites almost never strike the surface at a 90-degree angle. They enter the atmosphere on a trajectory, meaning their impact craters should be elongated and oval-shaped. A perfectly round crater is left by only one thing: an explosion that occurred either on the surface or directly above it. Thousands of such craters around the world do not suggest a cosmic bombardment, but something far more terrifying. Another piece of silent evidence is our forests. We tend to think of them as ancient and pristine, but this is an illusion. Try to find trees in the forests of Eurasia or North America that are older than 150 or, in rare cases, 200 years old. They are almost non-existent, And yet many species, like oaks and larches, can live for 500 years or more, reaching colossal sizes. Where are all these giant patriarch trees? The answer is simple. They are gone. Because about 200 years ago, all the old vegetation on the planet was destroyed. What we see today is new growth that sprang up after a total wipeout. Furthermore, satellite maps reveal vast areas of forest, especially in Siberia, that are planted in unnaturally straight, intersecting lines at right angles. This doesn't look like a natural forest, but a massive reforestation project, systematically carried out by someone after the old biosphere had been completely erased from the face of the Earth. Now let's put all the clues together. The buried cities are evidence of a global flood. The perfectly round craters are evidence of multiple powerful explosions. The absence of old-growth forests and the strange tree plantations are evidence of the complete destruction of the old biosphere and a subsequent attempt to restore it. When we see all of this together, it no longer looks like a series of random natural disasters. It looks like the aftermath of a deliberate and total assault. This wasn't a natural catastrophe. This was a war on a scale we can barely even imagine. A war. But how could it not only destroy cities, but change the very physics of the entire planet? How could a war switch off the world for giants and dinosaurs, making it uninhabitable for them, but leave it for us, the smaller humans? We have a disturbingly precise modern analogy that will help us understand. A war. But this was not a clash of armies armed with steel and gunpowder. This was a war of a different order, using technologies capable of striking not at cities or armies, but at the planet itself, at the fundamental laws of its physics. The perfectly round craters scattered across the globe are the marks of explosions of such colossal power that they literally tore a hole in the dense atmosphere of the ancient world. A series of such strikes, perhaps delivered simultaneously at different points on the planet, led to a catastrophic and almost instantaneous drop in atmospheric pressure. The sky, in a literal sense, fell. To understand what happened next, imagine a deep-sea fish that is rapidly brought to the surface. Its body, adapted to the immense pressure of the water column, literally expands in the low-pressure environment of the surface. For the giants and massive animals of the old world, the drop in atmospheric pressure was exactly like that, but on a planetary scale. Their powerful bodies were perfectly balanced with the dense, heavy atmosphere. The internal pressure of their bodies was counteracted by the external pressure. When that external pressure vanished, the balance was broken. Their systems simply could not handle it. This was not a gradual process of extinction. It was a sudden physiological collapse for every large species on the planet. But why did we survive? Why did humans and animals of our current size endure? The answer lies in scale. Our smaller bodies, having less internal pressure, had a chance to adapt to the new hostile conditions. This adaptation required a fundamental change in our biochemistry. Our body's internal pressure is about 6 to 7 atmospheres. To compensate for this pressure in a thin atmosphere, and to keep from literally being torn apart from the inside, our bodies needed an external regulator. That regulator became common table salt. The need for salt, which seems natural to us today, may have been the very evolutionary mechanism that allowed our ancestors to survive in a world with a fallen sky. This abrupt change made the world incredibly heavy to live in. Look at the fashion of the 19th and early 20th centuries. Everywhere, in photographs and chronicles, we see people with walking sticks. And not just elderly aristocrats. Young people, men and women of all classes, are seen with canes. In the 20th century, it truly became a fashion accessory, but in the 19th century, it was a grim necessity. After the catastrophe, it was simply difficult for people to move around. Gravity hadn't changed, but the feeling of one's own body had. The cane was not a style choice. It was a support to help survivors navigate the new, physically difficult conditions. The giants and dinosaurs simply couldn't adapt, and so they vanished. This may all sound like a bold theory, but we have irrefutable proof that this mechanism works. And this proof comes from our own recent history. In the 1950s and 60s, the USSR and the USA conducted over 1,000 atmospheric nuclear tests. In the following years, the 60s and 70s, scientists all over the world recorded a significant drop in global atmospheric pressure and a noticeable climatic shift towards cooling. The older generation will confirm that the winters in those years were unusually severe. In 1961, during the test of the most powerful thermonuclear device, the nuclear reaction was so intense that it began to involve hydrogen from the atmosphere itself. This process lasted for about half an hour and created a massive hole in the ozone layer. This was a key moment that explained a great deal. Scientists saw with their own eyes how their creation affected the planet. Subsequently, a direct link between nuclear testing and the drop in atmospheric pressure was confirmed. This discovery so alarmed the world powers that in 1963, the treaty banning nuclear weapon tests in the atmosphere, outer space, and underwater was signed. It turns out that in the mid-20th century, humanity unwittingly repeated in miniature the very event that destroyed the previous civilization. Terrified by the consequences, they banned the tests. But the ultimate question remains: who was fighting whom 200 years ago? And who won that war? The answer to who fought whom and who won that war can be found by simply looking around. The victors were the ones who remained. The victors were the ones whose world we now consider to be the only one possible. We are living in a world that was literally built on the ruins of the previous one, and we are breathing air that was specifically altered to be uninhabitable for our predecessors. The victors of that war achieved more than just military superiority. Their goal was something far grander: a complete and final changing of the rules of the game, a reformatting of the planet itself. They didn't just destroy their enemy. They destroyed their enemy's habitat by altering a fundamental physical parameter: atmospheric pressure. It was the perfect strike, making the very existence of all large life forms impossible, from giant trees and dinosaurs to the race of giants. For them, the new world became a death trap, while for the ancestors of modern humanity, it became the only chance for survival. After the physical world was changed, the second, equally important phase began: changing history. The very memory of the past had to be erased. The victors needed to create a new reality, a new timeline in which there was no room for the world that came before. And this task was accomplished with astonishing efficiency. All traces and artifacts were carefully gathered and reinterpreted. The fossilized skeletons of enormous creatures, they were named dinosaurs and placed in the distant past, separated from us by an insurmountable gulf of 65 million years. This brilliant manipulation of time instantly severed any possible connection between these creatures and the recent history of mankind. The giant tools and weapons in museums, they were given convenient and unquestionable labels: ceremonial, parade, two-handed. These terms turned the utilitarian objects of another race into curiosities and exceptions that didn't disrupt the official picture of the world. The buried cities all over the globe? They were explained away by the slow, natural accumulation of a cultural layer. This version concealed the true cause: a sudden and catastrophic flood that was just one of the consequences of that global war. The ancient legends and myths of giants, titans, and dragons found in every culture on the planet, they were relegated to the realm of fairy tales, fictions, and children's fantasies. In this way, the ancestral memory of humanity itself was discredited, transforming from historical chronicle into folklore. As a result, we find ourselves in a perfectly constructed reality. We live in a world we believe to be the only and unchanging one. We learn a history in school that was written by the victors, and we trust a science that operates with facts selected and filtered to fit this new paradigm. Our entire civilization, our worldview, our knowledge of the past, it is all a grand project, built on the foundation of a great catastrophe and the great forgetting that followed. Now, knowing this, look again at the buried buildings in your city, at the old maps where familiar lands are marked as blank spaces or the mysterious Tartary, at the legends of dragons and giants you were told as a child. Perhaps these are not just stones, paper, and fairy tales. Perhaps they are the surviving fragments of a mosaic, shards of the truth about a lost world. The truth is much closer than we think. It's not in distant archives, but right beneath our feet and deep within our genetic memory. What do you think?